From the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler. Bob Detrick is a 1984 graduate of The Ohio State University with a degree in finance, and he is a financial planning professional in Central Ohio. He is the co-author of the new book, Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box, How the Performance of Our Presidents Has Impacted Your Wallet, with Lou Goldfarb, also an OSU graduate with a BA in business and a JD from the law school. Mr. Goldfarb is also an assistant professor of clinical law and director of entrepreneurship and community development at the University of Cincinnati Law School. Welcome both to Writers Talk.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug, for having us. Appreciate it.
Let's talk about the book. You describe Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box, how the performance of our presidents has impacted your wallet as, quote, a review of 80 years of our nation's economic history, from the Great Depression and Herbert Hoover to the Great Recession and George W. Bush, a time period in which Democratic and Republican parties occupied the Oval Office for precisely 40 years each. What was your reason for writing the book? How did it get started?
Actually, I'll lead off if I may. The idea for the book came up about 4 years ago when I had a seminar for our clients in 2008. This was right before Bear Stearns had collapsed, which was the beginning of the debacle in 2008. And I did some research on, because it was an election year, I wanted to see how the presidents had performed for my clients. And we started with Herbert Hoover, and we took it all the way through, at that time, almost 4 years or 3.5 years with George W. And what I found was pretty astounding, that the numbers didn't favor the Republicans at all. They totally favored the Democrats, and that contradicted everything I'd learned growing up, if you will, in a very conservative profession. So at the end of the day, when we started looking at some other data points, we realized that, gee, this is going to follow suit. This is not what we expected we'd find. And that was kind of the beginning of the book, was 2008.
And how did you then meet Mr. Goldfarb to start that whole process of the book?
Good question. Lou is a client of our wealth management practice that Stephen Morgan and I own, called Polaris Financial Partners up in Westerville. Lou has been a client for about 7 years, I think. I told Lou about the book, about the notion of the book, and asked him if he'd like to consider the idea of joining me. And about 1.5 years ago, and he agreed, and I'm very happy to have him. He's been the quantitative guy. I've been the qualitative guy. It's really worked well.
Yeah, and Bob's been managing my money for about 6 years. It's been about 6-7 years, and it seemed like whenever we got together, to talk about how my investments were doing, the talk turned to politics.
Okay,
and we found that both of us were kind of political junkies.
And that was entirely my fault. I generally turn the conversation to politics if it's appropriate.
So I have no idea how my investments are doing, but we know how the presidents are doing.
Okay, all right.
Well,
now,
hopefully that's not entirely true.
You rank the presidents by a score you refer to as the Presidential Ranking of Economic Stewardship, or PRES, which relies on what you call the 3 economic pillars: U.S. financial health, personal wealth, and business prosperity. Tell me about these pillars and how they impact the rankings.
Yeah, we wanted to do a fair and meaningful and objective evaluation of the presidential performance over the years, and so we looked at 12 different economic indicators that come from very reputable sources, and they go all the way back to 1929, the beginning of our study of 80 years, and we wanted to look at the performance of the presidents from different perspectives. From the business owner's perspective, we have our business prosperity pillar. From the average worker and family's perspective, we have the personal wealth pillar. And then we have a pillar that's kind of from the 10,000-foot level, the macroeconomic indicators, which is our U.S. financial health pillar. So we look at these 12 economic indicators to objectively score and measure the performance of each of the presidents under each of these economic indicators, and add the scores together for how they performed and come up with rankings of the presidents.
Okay. Now, you just used the phrase objectively score, and that's one of the things that interested me in the book, because it's so difficult to, especially in today's political climate, to do something like this. I would imagine, to say this is an objective score and define it in ways that you can get any sort of agreement across political lines. Have you had experience so far with that, with saying to people, this is an objective indicator because of the following, and getting agreement?
I think the one common argument we'll probably hear will be that there should be some sort of lag time, that the president, once he's in office, there might be a lag time of 2 or 3 or 4 years before his policies take effect. And we think that's a bunch of nonsense, quite frankly. We believe in this notion that the president is the CEO of the country when he's in office. for example, just like Jim Tressel was head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes from 2001 to 2010. When Tressel came in 2001, he came into a situation that was kind of ambiguous. I mean, he had the team had a poor academic record. They had a lot of discipline problems. He came in and he had his first 3 years. He was 7-5, 14-0, and 11-2. Okay, and his second year he won the national championship. Now, can you imagine? Let's say that was reversed. Let's say he came in and he was 5-7 and 7-7 in the second year, and 4-8 in his third year. And then at the end of his third year, he said, "Well, you know, it's John Cooper's fault. I'm going to blame John Cooper because he gave me kind of a mess to deal with, so I'm going to blame it on him." We believe that is just ridiculous. There's no CEO in the country. There's no head coach of a football team or manager of a baseball team who could come in and say, you know, blame it on my predecessor for the first 3 years. You can't blame it on me. And we believe that that's the same thing is true here, that the president has to stand on his economic record, or someday her economic record. I hope if we get a female president someday, that is what has to stand. And that's how we made our rankings.
Okay. So the indicators that you're using then are things that you've had some success in getting other people to buy into, because once you make that argument to say it's the president's fault one way or the other, then the economic indicators fall in line that you get agreement on.
Well, we think that each president has inherited a very unique set of circumstances. Some have been better than others, economically speaking. And we're looking at the economic perspective, not the global perspective, the economic perspective. In George W. Bush's case, he inherited a pretty good situation from Bill Clinton. On the other hand, Ronald Reagan inherited a pretty bad set of circumstances from Jimmy Carter. But each president has had to deal with that mess or that situation and deal with it effectively. And they either, through our Prez rules, either dealt with the situation effectively or not.
Okay. And several of our indicators do look at, did that president, what did they do with what they inherited? Several of them look at, did unemployment increase or decrease while they were president? Did corporate profits grow or did they decrease while they were president? So we have several indicators that look at, did they make better or worse what they inherited?
Okay. I'm talking with Bob Detrick and Lud Goldfarb, authors of the new book, Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box. Now, in the book, you frequently champion the work of Mariner Eccles, the first Federal Reserve chairman, a Republican, and an FDR appointee. What made him stand out to you?
Actually, if I may, I'll start on this one. Mariner Eccles was someone I learned about just about 7 years ago. I'd never even heard of the man before that. And when I learned about him, I was fascinated by the little bit I knew, and I started reading about him. And this guy represented everything that this country stands for. He defines the word statesmanship. And in my view, that's something that this country has gotten away from and something that we desperately need to get back to, if you will. I believe in conservatism from the standpoint that we need to go back to the future and get back to guys like Mariner Eccles and FDR who worked for the betterment of the country. Guys like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill who worked for the betterment of the country. We're not there now. I mean, we're not anywhere close to that. And I think we desperately need to get back to people like Eccles and FDR.
And was that the same case for you?
Yeah, I agree with what Bob said. Mariner Eccles was kind of an unsung American hero. Back in the Great Depression, he was the one who authored many of the New Deal programs that FDR adopted and helped us get out of the Great Depression. Very few people know that, but he was the person who kind of went against the grain, went against what everyone else wanted to do at that time, which was balance the budget. Mariner Eccles was the guy who came in and convinced FDR, we need to implement some government programs to help stimulate this economy. And fortunately, FDR listened to him.
Why do you think Mariner Eccles is not better known when he's the author of the New Deal programs that you're describing here?
He wasn't one who cared for the limelight or cared for politics, although he really was the consummate politician. If you read his book or his books, which I've read, and stories about him, he was the consummate politician. But he really didn't care for the limelight and didn't care for who got the credit. He knew FDR would get the credit, and as he rightfully should have. But the reality is, as Lou alluded to, Mariner Eccles was the architect of a lot of the New Deal programs. He came up with the idea of the Banking Act, the FHA, the FDIC was his idea. He came up with the notion of a lot of the alphabet soup programs like the WPA and the CCC and so forth that came out then. So he was a unique guy. This was, again, keep in mind, he was worth about $50 to $70 million when he came to Washington in 1933. So he was a multi-billionaire in today's dollars. He would have been the Warren Buffett of his day. But he came to Washington to bring some security back to our economy, and that's exactly what he did.
Okay. How did you collaborate on Bulls, Bears, and the ballot box. You're in two different fields doing different things. What was the process like of working on this book?
I think we played to our strengths, so to speak. I think I'm more of a detailed, quantitative, numbers crunching kind of guy. Bob's more of a big picture kind of qualitative guy. So we kind of try to divide up the work in accordance with our strengths. And I'd say that I focus maybe more on the putting together the Prez rankings and the graphs that you'll see. We have almost 70 graphs in our book, and most of those graphs I put together. Bob focused more on kind of the qualitative side of things and drafting a lot of the chapters, which provide a lot of the insights on the presidents, whereas I focus more on kind of the I'd say the numerical side.
Okay. And coming from a financial planning background, tell me about your writing the history parts of this. You said you had research assistants to help with that aspect of it?
We did. We assembled a terrific research team that were, a combination of my staff, some of Lou's students from UC, from his program there. We had a couple other folks here in Central Ohio we tapped into, including Dr. Jonathan Fox here at Ohio State, who's been a colleague of mine I worked with back in the 90s and the earlier part of the 2000 decade. But at the end of and Jonathan actually is going to Iowa State. I should state that as well. But he's moving to Des Moines or somewhere this summer. But he was also of great help. But it was challenging. I mean, you got two different types of people who are trying to work on the book. But to me, it was like a partnership, and a partnership is kind of like being married with none of the fun stuff. And that's part of that's one of the realities of life. But we worked through it.
A lot of twists and turns and ups and downs, but we got through it.
Exactly.
Tell me about some of the more difficult moments that you had contention over. I'm curious about what it was that arose that was, without getting back into the argument, what was it that you said, okay, this is going to be a moment we're really going to have to sit down and work out, say, the view of the book? Or
are you trying to start a fight, Doug?
I am possibly trying to start a fight here. You're much too comfortable together. But what were those difficult moments, and how did you get past them?
I would say that, again, as Lou alluded to, he pays tremendous attention to detail. I focus more on the marketing aspect of things and the big picture. And so sometimes the animosity was just over who would manage what. But at the end of the day, we worked through the problems successfully. And that was what was important as far as I was concerned.
Okay.
But the real reason I chose Lou as my co-author was that if you look at the book, the number of characters in his name is exactly the number that are in my name, 3 and 8.
Oh, okay.
So it just really matched
across the top of the book.
Right, yeah, but you've got they're next to each other, not on top of each other, which would have been the next book would have been.
That was part of the deal. Bob wanted top billing.
I see. It's because it's his idea. It's always the person that comes up with the idea. All right. You refrained from judging Obama's presidency because it was too fresh as you were writing the book. Have you been keeping tabs on the pillars in his administration? I suspect that you have, and even a preliminary feeling.
Yeah, we just published an article, in fact, that I'd written that it compares Obama's first 3.5 years roughly to Ronald Reagan's first 3.5. Ronald Reagan being the conservative icon for the Republican Party. And what's interesting is on 9 or 10 of the 12 data points, Obama does better than Reagan, including the stock market. If you take a look at the stock market returns in the first 3.5 years of Reagan's administration, we averaged between 6 and 7%. We actually had a very serious recession of almost 18 months in Reagan's first term. Unemployment was 9.5% in the August of 1983, which would have been August of last year for Obama. And yet we got it down to 7.4 by November of 1984, and Reagan won by a landslide. But I think that the point is, Reagan inherited the mess, and so did Obama. I think we need to give Obama a break. He inherited a mess that was worse than anything we've seen since 1933.
Okay. Now, I don't usually ask political questions, but the nature of Bulls, Bears in the ballot box and the cover recommendation by a former Democratic National Committee chairman suggests a question. Did the writing of this book alter or confirm your political affiliations? And I'm not asking what they are, but I'm curious about what it did to you as you wrote the book.
I don't know if it altered or confirmed my affiliations. I think it answered some questions I had in my mind. I mean, I've always heard a lot of rhetoric, actually coming from both sides, making claims about which party is better for the economy, and it kind of satisfied some curiosity I had. I wanted to have some numbers to back up what had been claimed for years by the parties as to who was better for the economy and better for my finances and your finances. And I think our book did that.
Okay. And I'm talking with Bob Detrick and Lou Goldfarb, authors of the new book, Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box, How the Performance of Our Presidents Has Impacted Your Wallet. Now, you've got mutual backgrounds as financial planners and, of course, OSU graduates, and that lends you credibility, we like to say, for your book. How do you anticipate your conclusions being received by what some people might assume to be a field, financial planning, that has a lot of conservatives in it?
We're unsure of that. At the end of the day, again, I've grown up in a very conservative profession. The dogma I've learned for 2 decades was that when Republicans are in office, the market does better, the economy performs better, and so on. And what we've discovered in our book is that is totally untrue. We basically have uncovered or repudiated the myth of Republican economic dominance, which I think will be a big surprise in the book. At the end of the day, though, you'd never know that. And we come down on the Democrats, too, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to stand on and convey their own message. And unfortunately, they've not done a good job of that. Hopefully, this book will help both parties in that regard.
Yeah, I'm certain there are people who will not like our conclusions despite our numbers and will find ways to criticize how we did it. Right. And we're prepared to defend ourselves.
Okay. Now, Lou Goldfarb, you're in academic circles.
I am. It's a kind of a late in life, or I don't know if it's midlife or late in life. I'm not sure which it is. Career change for me. I had practiced law for a number of years and made a change in academia about 4 years ago.
Okay. So how do you anticipate it being received in academic circles? Do you think that it's going to go against received wisdom there as well?
I don't know. I haven't given it that much thought. I think, I think we have a lot of support for what we're saying in our book. We have numerical support and statistical analysis. So I think it'll be well received. As you know, in the academic world, there are a lot of different ideas, and there's always plenty of debate among academic types. And I'm sure that, again, from the academic side, there'll be some disagreement about what statistics we picked and how we did the calculations. But I think we have a solid defense for how we calculated the Prez rankings.
Now, you're not suggesting that academic economics people would have disagreement, because surely that's objective. there's no question with it if it's numbers, right? What is the old? There's
numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't lie. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Isn't that the old saying? And so my one other question that I was curious about, Mr. Detrick, is as a business person within the financial field, was it a concern for you to write the book because of how it might impact, say, your own business? How something like this, how personal did it get for you as you were writing it, and you thought, I may alienate people because of it?
That was a concern to an extent. But again, a lot of the clients whom we work with, and who Stephen and I work with, and we've worked with for 10, 15, 20, 25, and even 28, 29 years. So, we think, in fact, what's interesting is one of my best clients and best friends I've known 28 years is a Republican, and a very staunch Republican. And we go at it fist to cuffs sometimes when we talk politics, and the expletives fly sometimes, but with all due respect. But my point is, he referred us to David Wilhelm. He's good friends with David Wilhelm. He's on the same bank board down in Logan, Ohio. He referred us to David because he thought that David could help us sell the book. He wanted us to get the book out. So again, I want people to understand that this is not just about partisanship. Some of my best friends and clients are Republicans, and I love them dearly, despite the fact that this book may disagree with them to some extent. But it did have an impact with a couple people. I won't deny that. But for most people, it became a non-issue.
Okay. What are your future plans for book writing? You've got this one down. Do you have other things brewing in the pot now that you've worked together and you've found the beauty of collaborative writing?
I think it's a little too early to tell, maybe. We've talked a little bit about, we'd like to write a book that includes the Obama economic saga, possibly at some point. But we're early on. Our book comes out this weekend. We have several book signings planned, including one July 7th here at Barnes & Noble up in Polaris. Okay. Can I plug that on the air?
Sure.
Okay, July 7th at 1 o'clock at Polaris. We'll be doing a book signing.
Yeah, we've got 28 book signings so far. So we're really excited about that. And we're trying to cover a lot of the swing states. So we're going from Scranton to Oshkosh. We have book signings in D.C. this weekend, in Bethesda, Maryland, in Fairfax, Virginia on Saturday and Sunday. Then we're going to be going from Philadelphia, Southern Jersey, all the way up to Chicago, I think in late July. So we're excited about that aspect of it so far. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, though, we'll decide to do a second book if this one does well, I think.
Okay. So you're excited to go on the book tour. You may be one of the first authors I've spoken to that are actually excited to go on the book tour and are looking forward to the writer's cramp, the long hours, the travel. And I mean to say it's a wonderful thing from everything I've heard. I've not been on one. Mm-hmm. So what are the final things you'd like to say to folks who are listening about your book and about the economic situation? I'm not going to ask you to predict the election or anything like that, which I suspect will be asked of you repeatedly. But
we can do that if you'd like. Well, I'd be more than glad to give you some insight on that if you'd like. That's up to you if you want to ask the question.
I mean, I really just hope our book inspires people to be informed when they vote.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the main messages of our book is when you pull that lever in the ballot box, that's a very serious thing. And you should make sure that you're fully informed when you cast that vote. And we're hoping, that our book can help people become informed.
I would add to that and say, and that's Lou's exactly right, but I would even add to that and say that your vote can have a very significant impact on your bottom line, on your net worth. And what we're telling people or suggesting to people is that, vote for your IRA, vote for your 401k plan, vote for your 403b plan, vote for your son or daughter's 529 plan. Forget all this nonsense that we hear on TV about social stuff, which often is just red herrings disguised to distract us anyway. Focus on what is in your best interest. And that's really what the book's about. Vote for your economic pocketbook, if you will.
Okay. Well, Bob Detrick and Lou Goldfarb, I thank you very much for being here today on Writers Talk. And the website, again, is
www.bullsbearsandtheballotbox.com, all one word.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.